Hey guys, how we doing? Back in another video from Annie News, and I'm excited for this one. I was going to watch his Fate Grand Order Explained video, like what it is, because I'm really intrigued, but I love the character discussions that he does on the Overlord characters. And we've got How Strong is Cocytus. We've had the Who is Cocytus videos, really interesting stuff, and now we're going to see how strong exactly he is. Let's just get straight into it. Let's get into this. Boom, this is part 1, so there's a second one coming. That's going to be the last Overlord video, surely. I want a season 4, man. I want it so bad. But anyway, let's get into this.
Cocytus is well known for having the best defensive capabilities, given his almost maxed out physical attacks and numerous powerful skills, weapons, and abilities. But
his
as
armor
we
looks
already
so
know, that doesn't necessarily translate to being the strongest out of the four guardians. There are many methods that each of them can use to gain the upper edge if they were to ever fight him. So the fact that Cocytus was once able to deal damage to Albedo in the past is certainly something worth looking into.
Damn.
So let's take a closer look at everything from his race
really
and job classes
interesting
to the skills and abilities that come with it. And hopefully by the end, we'll have an answer to the video's title question of how strong is Cocytus. But first, this video. Let's start with his race. Cocytus is a member of an unknown insectoid race that blends features from multiple different types of insects together. This includes multiple arms, large mandibles, a scorpion-like tail, and a tough exoskeleton. 30 of his levels are distributed into his racial classes, split between a total of 3 different types, meaning an insectoid in Yggdrasil is classified as a heteromorph, one of the 3 main race types that a player can choose upon character creation. In case you don't remember, as a heteromorph, Cocytus has access to a robust racial class tree in addition to his normal job class tree. This would allow him to literally morph into a new creature as he takes levels in more advanced racial classes. Kind of like how a Pokemon evolves into a stronger form. As a result,
that's a really simplistic way of putting it. I like it.
Racial levels in multiple different classes, which is opposed to demi-humans who can only have 1 or 2 classes, or humanoids who cannot have levels in races at all. As for Cocytus' specific build, the level distribution includes 10 in Insect Fighter, 10 in Vermin Lord, and a further 10 Unknown, bringing us to the aforementioned total of 30 racial class levels.
Vermin Lord.
Now, if I had to guess, the 10 that are unknown are likely put into his primary race, while Insect Fighter and Vermin Lord are the evolutionary forms of it, especially since they don't seem to refer to any specific type of insect. They're rather just broad descriptors of insectoid elements. In fact, it's possible that all playable insect characters in Yggdrasil were derived from the same base insect race, perhaps called
and then they've
something
evolved
like
into what they are.
For instance, the Pleiades Antoma, one of the other insect creatures, has only 12 racial class levels, 2 of which are unknown and 10 of which are simply arachnoid. So this could infer that first you would have to select the base insect class, then the class after would be the type of insect you want
to go for, and then you go from there.
This isn't something that's just isolated with Antoma or Cocytus either, though. Similarly, one of the 5 worst Kyokuko also has 2 unknown insect levels, then more levels in a class called Insect Druid, which sounds remarkably similar to Cocytus' Insect Fighter. It's almost like both of them started with the same base insect race,
and then they've gone up.
Then for their next racial class, they had a choice between things like Insect Fighter, Insect Druid, Insect Ranger, and so on. Then, depending on which form they picked and how far up they progressed, they would end up with radically different appearances and capabilities.
That's cool.
So, personally, we believe this type of character progression is most likely, since, honestly, it's really difficult to pick out what kind of insect race Cocytus is just from looking at him. I mean, first we see he has beetle-like features, similar to that of the Japanese rhinoceros beetle, which really fits his character motif since its name in Japanese is the Kabuto beetle, a reference to a particular kind of Japanese helmet possessed by samurai. Something the samurai-obsessed Takuma Kazuchi would definitely go for when creating
that makes sense.
The thing about the Kabuto beetle, though, is that they're named after their particularly notable head, a feature that Cocytus clearly doesn't resemble. Not to mention that there's all the other features too, like his scorpion-like tail, his bipedal mantis-like movements, and the ant-like mandibles. So, like I said, maybe all insects are part of one big happy insect race. Then you can mix and match whatever crazy appearance you want after. However, it is still possible that there are many base insect races, each with their own unique sets of abilities. With this format, these races would then follow the more standard RPG format, and they would share a lot of derivative races like Insect Fighter or Insect Druid, which any insect-type race could ultimately freely pick. Kind of like how both a human and an elf can become wizards. In fact, there appear to be quite a few racial classes which are mirrors of job classes. Though, this is generally more common for the demi-human races rather than the heteromorphs. For example, goblins can get racial classes in Goblin Cleric or Goblin Mage, but they can also get formal training and level up the job classes of Wizard and Cleric. Thematically speaking, these racial classes tend to be more primitive in nature and relate more to the innate inborn talent of the race in question, whereas job classes require something akin to formal education and training in a civilized society. This is yet another mechanic that was borrowed from Dungeons & Dragons. In the case of an insect fighter like Cocytus, that means it would share some basic similarities with the normal fighter class that humanoid races had access to, but with large portions of it adapted towards insect life, culture, and morphology. Speaking of Cocytus' insect fighter, the fighter name is actually a direct reference to one of the core classes in Dungeons & Dragons, the fighter. As a core class, a fighter was meant to be extremely flexible, allowing the player to build it into almost any kind of combat specialist they could think of. Pretty much all of the classes, features, and abilities were user-selected, in the sense that they could specialize in pretty much anything. Dual-wielding, archery, mounted combat, disarming, multi-hit attacks, shield-based offense and defense,
easy guys stuff used in there
if it
as well.
involves combat, then you could probably specialize in it. Now, while most classes could access most of these features to one extent or another, the fighter was special in the sense that it could choose more of them than any of the other classes.
So it more varied.
Importantly, the fighter was also often a weapons expert. They could choose a single kind of weapon, like a longsword or a heavy mace,
Cocytus does seem to have like a few different weapons,
or other stats while using it. This latter part is probably the most iconic aspect of fighters in Dungeons & Dragons, primarily because it was one of their only exclusive features, and thus it is the class feature most likely to have been borrowed by Maruyama for fighters in Overlord. However, that's not our focus. We're trying to figure out the insect fighter race class, not a generic fighter job class.
No.
Yes, fighters in general are weapons specialists, but there's something unique about insects and other heteromorphs that you wouldn't see from a regular fighter. It's what's known as natural gear. They're natural weapons and armor.
Right.
Natural gear is a mechanic that basically entails any kind of weapon or armor that is innate to the creature,
that he wears is
like a powerful exoskeleton or some sharp claws. It has several major advantages.
So it's like literally part of you.
For one, it doesn't drop upon the user's death, so you won't have to worry about replacing it if you, say, accidentally died while raiding an enemy guild.
Right.
For another,
don't forget the game mechanic, it was a game.
Considerably cheaper than manufactured equipment of equivalent power. Like all weapons, they had a data crystal capacity that determined the number of special abilities that could be added to them. But by being a part of the user's body, natural equipment would grow more powerful as one leveled up.
As you level up, it would level up with you.
It was much easier than having to find these certain requisite item drops needed to upgrade regular equipment.
That does make sense. That's classier.
They didn't need to be repaired, since healing spells would restore any damage.
Because it's part of you. Yes, that makes sense. That's class.
Opponents who specialized in sunder abilities designed to target and destroy the opponent's equipment would be ineffective, as a simple healing spell could fix the problem. This also meant that they could be worn indefinitely, unlike regular equipment which suffered degradation over time and in battle. It even eliminates the time the user would normally have to spend either repairing their armor or swapping it out for a new set of equipment. In exchange for these advantages, though, natural gear came with 4 important disadvantages. First, in order to be acquired, they required dedicated racial levels.
Right, so
Most
you have to properly dedicate yourself to one specific thing.
Meaning they were restricted to specific classes and races. On top of this, you had to sacrifice levels of other potentially useful classes in order to further acquire, specialize, and improve them. This is related to the second drawback
like in Minecraft, where you want to enchant stuff, you have to lose levels. My girlfriend plays a lot of Minecraft
recently. It was almost impossible for natural gear to be the equivalent of custom-made divine quality gear.
Can't believe I just used Minecraft as an example of that, but yeah.
Require a very specialized build. In general, most natural gear peaked at around legendary quality, which meant that if one's opponent had farmed up a set of divine gear, then they'd have a noticeable advantage in stats. The third restriction was that one could not stack both natural gear and
custom. Right, so you had to stick with...
you couldn't wear armor over top your exoskeleton, and you couldn't use your claws while holding a sword. You could still wear accessories like rings, cloaks, and necklaces, though. Now, finally, and arguably the most important limitation was that natural equipment could not be swapped around easily like regular equipment.
Of course, because it's part of you.
Most players only pulled out their most expensive and valuable equipment when they were sure that they wouldn't lose it on death. So, general adventuring was typically performed with equipment that was 1 or 2 steps down in quality from your go-to and most valuable set of gear. and it was highly customary to swap between different sets of lower tier items, especially since it was much easier to obtain several sets of lower tier equipment for the same cost as a single set of higher tier equipment. As a result, players built custom sets designed for specific situations. Like how the cloak
if you had natural gear, you can't do that because it's part of you. You can't rearrange and swap around stuff. That's
his fire damage resistance. Now, all of these limitations together meant that you would only see investments in natural equipment on very specific builds, and committing to such was a very major decision. Let's use Shelt here as an example.
Okay.
Her fingernails are a natural weapon possessed by a vampire.
Yes.
In her case, these natural weapons were relatively inconsequential as she possessed the divine quality weapon, the Spewing Lance, though her fingernails were still durable enough to parry Brain Unglaus's attacks.
So freaking cool.
It's unlikely Pararonchino invested
I
heavily
love how
into using her claws
happy he was when he was able to actually
it's
just
more likely
cut her
the
nail.
claws were acquired incidentally
He's like,
from
my
taking
God,
levels
I did
in
it,
vampire
run away.
classes. In Cocytus' case, his natural equipment comes in the form of his thick armor-like exoskeleton that's covered in icy spikes. Given that this is Cocytus' fully leveled form, it's clear warrior Takamakazuchi had made the decision to invest very heavily into it, especially since it has to act as Cocytus' primary source of protection, replacing any armor that he could have otherwise worn. As such, it's likely around as tough as a set of legendary class armor, but still not quite at divine level. We do know for sure that it is at least comparable with the rest of the melee combat guardians, Sebas and Albedo. Even if he does have the lowest defenses among the three, melee fighters must have much more survivability than any other kind of build, since they do have to close in on an enemy and engage them at a close range, thus increasing the amount of attacks that will be directed towards them. That said, we don't know much about its defensive capabilities. What we do know is that not only is Cocytus immune to cold damage, he is also outright immune to damage from lower tier weapons and magic of low tier spells.
Right. An
ability very similar to the dragons that we saw Nabe fight against in Season 1. Entirely possible that some or even all of these features were provided by his exoskeleton, though he could have acquired this immunity from other accessories or from specific class features. I mean, immunity to such spells was seemingly quite common amongst both players and the NPCs that they created, likely to protect against foes who relied on summoning large quantities of weak monsters to overwhelm their opponent. Even Ainz possesses the ability to outright ignore all damage from any foe below level 60.
Damn.
However, this is due to one of his undead racial class features, and not attributed to his gear. In any case, we theorize that acquiring and improving natural weapons and armor required one to take associated race class levels in things like Insect Fighter, or advanced racial insectoid ones that specialized in improving melee combat. Insects devoted to spellcasting like Kyokuko would naturally have a less durable exoskeleton, since they weren't expected to be on the front lines.
Yeah, they're not going to be fighting from a distance, are they? They're not going to be long,
but
short range.
Would definitely want and need to select classes like that for Cocytus' melee-oriented build. We also suspect his tail counts as a natural weapon too, as he does use it in battle against the Lizardmen. Though it isn't specifically confirmed in the light novel that it actually had counted as one in the game. Regardless, he does have multiple arms for equipping multiple weapons.
Which is so cool as well.
Even if his tail is a natural weapon, it's likely that warrior Takamakazuchi didn't bother to invest or improve it very much. Alternatively, his use of the tail as a weapon could have been something that developed during the transition from Yggdrasil to the New World. After all, many things have changed. From mechanics like friendly fire to the fact that NPCs are now thinking, sometimes breathing, living beings, instead of mindless script-based NPCs. The fact that Cocytus can use his tail as a weapon could be a natural extension of him gaining sentience, especially if the video game NPC he was before didn't have the capability. Now, as for his 10 levels in Vermin Lord, well, that name fits right at home with the samurai theme. Lords in Japanese fantasy and fiction are often depicted possessing great skill and ability in battle. After all, as we mentioned in the last video, in the Sengoku period of Japanese history, Lord might as well have been synonymous with warlord, and thus it was practically a requirement to be a master of warfare. So it could be that a Vermin Lord is a powerful warrior class available to those of insectoid races that would provide even more powerful abilities than a typical insect fighter. However, it has been briefly alluded to multiple times that Cocytus also has a number of insectoid minions under his command, some of which are actually quite high level. For instance, many of the creatures who were with him alongside Antoma while he was leading the expedition against the Lizardmen were his minions, and they are in fact supposed to be a higher level than Antoma.
Oh,
it's possible that
really?
much like Aura, Kyohuko, Antoma, Demiurge, and so on, that some of his classes would allow him to summon or control creatures.
That's class.
I mean, given the commanding nature of its name, Vermin Lord would be a perfect title for such a class. However, we can't rule out the possibility that these minions are more akin to Shalter's Vampire Brides or Demiurge's 7 Evil Lords,
right.
aka mercenary monsters, beings acquired through magic contracts that would expend gold in exchange for their indefinite services. These creatures would then be assigned as Cocytus' minions through some kind of footnote in his biography page. Then, when Nazarick was transported out of the video game Yggdrasil and into the New World, they became his actual minions. Ultimately, his title as given by warrior Takuma Kazuchi is the Ruler of the Frozen Glacier, which is the name for the 5th floor of Nazarick. So perhaps Takuma Kazuchi meant to allude to the idea that he leads an army of insect creatures who
that
live
are
in
all
his
from
rule.
there. Yeah.
In any case, as you would expect from the warrior Cocytus, he is fairly chummy with most of his insect minions. It is well known that Cocytus is good friends with most of the insectoids in Nazarick, including Kyohuko and Goshokokuchuo of the 5 worst. Although there is one notable exception, and that is for Antoma, who is infamously known amongst the insect denizens of Nazarick as the Familiar Eater, stemming from her habit of snacking on other insects.
Oh god,
but
right.
more on her
Stay
when
away
we
from
start
her.
the video series on the Pleiades. Anyway, that's
Ooh,
everything
so we're doing
related
more
to his
Overlord
racial
videos.
classes.
Oh, so there's
Next
still
would be
other
his
stuff to
70 levels
do.
of job classes, which is honestly a whole other monster that will be tackled separately in the next video, especially considering that that's where a lot of his named abilities come from, leaving room for a significant amount of speculation into their origins and what exactly they do. So be sure to join me next time as we get a better picture of Cocytus' overall build and abilities, and move closer to answering the question in the title of how strong he is.
Decent. That was part 1. So we've still got more stuff to learn about Cocytus, and he's gonna do videos on the Pleiades individually. That's cool, so yes. I was worried that Cocytus was like the end of these Overlord videos from any news. Awesome. Anyway, thank you guys very much for watching. What do you guys think of that? What do you guys think of this? Click like, subscribe if you haven't already. Leave comments down below. Let me know what I should watch and discuss in future videos. And I'll see you guys. Yes, guys. Next time. Bye.